I've always felt like the odd one out in my family. My name is Madison and I'm the youngest in my family. My parents, who were in their late 40s when I was born, had already been raising my older sister, Emily, for a decade. Emily was and still is the golden child. There's no malice in the way they treated me, but there's a distinct favoritism that's always been hard to ignore. My parents were thrilled to have Emily. She was the perfect firstborn, bright, outgoing, everything they hoped for. Then, unexpectedly, I came along. Looking back, I can see how they didn't plan for me. My mother would often make casual comments like, "Well, we didn't plan for you," while she worked on Emily's college applications or discussed the extracurriculars Emily was involved in. It was as though I was always an afterthought, not the intended second child but just someone who came along by accident. As I grew up, these comments became less about the accidental nature of my birth and more about how my sister was the one who was truly special. While Emily had everything, designer clothes, new toys, and all the attention she could ask for, I learned to live in her shadow. I wasn't resentful of her, but I knew I was never going to be the one to get the "look at what our child did" praise. Instead, I was the one who kept to herself, working quietly in the background, trying not to rock the boat. The clearest example of this favoritism came every year at my birthday. I remember one year I was about 10, and my birthday seemed to slip through the cracks because Emily had some school event happening at the same time. My parents decided that they'd make her day special instead, and my birthday was just forgotten. I ended up with a store-bought cake and no party. This wasn't the only time this happened, but it was one of the moments that really stood out to me. I knew from a young age that if there was a choice between Emily and me, I'd be the one to lose out. I never complained though. I did what I had to do, keeping my head down, doing my best in school and helping out with the household duties. My role in the family seemed to have been predetermined. Emily would get the accolades and I would pick up the slack. I took on the responsibility of helping with housework, cooking, and caring for my parents without question. That's just how it was. And to be honest, I didn't mind helping. I just wished I had felt noticed for who I was, not as a supporting player in Emily's life. While my sister got all the attention, I spent my time trying to prove myself in other ways. I was good with numbers, something my grandfather, a retired math professor, noticed early on. He taught me everything he could, and with his help, I became fascinated with mathematics. My grandparents became the real anchors of my life. They loved me unconditionally and I always felt seen by them, unlike at home. Emily's success only fueled the fire. She was the star and I was the one who always faded into the background. When I tried to talk to my parents about my achievements, it was always met with disinterest. I remember winning a regional science competition and presenting it to my parents with excitement. The response? "That's nice, dear." They were too busy thinking about Emily's next achievement to care about mine. But when it came to the more practical side of things, like college, things took a turn. I worked hard, and when the time came for me to apply, I was accepted into some top universities. But when I shared the news with my parents, the response was cold. "That's nice, but we've spent all our money on Emily," my mother said, barely looking up from her dinner. They'd financed her dream college, and when it came time for me, they simply said I'd need to figure it out on my own. It felt like I wasn't even worth the effort. The emotional neglect, paired with the practical neglect, was more than I could handle. I was expected to be the good, dutiful daughter, even if that meant doing everything for everyone else while getting nothing in return. And Emily? She didn't even have to try. She had it all handed to her on a silver platter, while I was left to figure out everything on my own. At that moment, something in me shifted. I realized that I wasn't going to let this continue. If my parents weren't going to notice me, then I would make my own way in life. And that's exactly what I did. I threw myself into my studies, pushing myself harder than ever to get out of the cycle of being overlooked. I got scholarships, internships, and worked harder than anyone else. Despite the lack of support at home, I was determined to prove myself. My hard work paid off when I secured a job at a leading investment bank after graduating. My life started to change, but the family dynamic remained the same. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone anymore, but I still felt the weight of that childhood. The desire to be seen, to be valued. It wasn't until years later, after my career took off, that I began to realize how deep the wounds ran. My parents never acknowledged what I had achieved, and Emily, well, she continued to be the golden child. But I was no longer the same person. I had a career, I had success, and for the first time in my life I had control over my future. But it wasn't just my future that was about to change. My relationship with my parents was on the verge of breaking, and it would all come to a head sooner than I expected. That's when the house came into the picture. The house that I thought would finally be my opportunity to show them that I could provide. That I could make things right. I had no idea how wrong I was. It was a rainy afternoon when everything changed. I was sitting in my office, going through some work documents when I got a call from my parents. My heart sank, not because I was dreading the conversation, but because I knew it was only a matter of time before their expectations, their demands, would collide with the life I had so carefully built for myself. "Madison, we need to talk." My mother's voice was shaky, almost tentative. That's when I knew something was up. My parents didn't call to talk, unless something was seriously amiss. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to sound calm, though I could feel my pulse quickening. "We've been thinking," she continued, her voice wavering, "and we really think you should let Emily and her family move into the house you bought for us. They're struggling and we're having a hard time making ends meet. You don't have to worry about anything, it's just temporary." For a moment, I sat there in stunned silence. My heart dropped to my stomach, and I could feel a mix of anger and disbelief simmering under my skin. Was I hearing this right? After all these years, after everything I'd done for them, this is how they repaid me? The house I had purchased with the hard-earned money I'd made working endless hours on Wall Street was now a pawn in the ongoing game of favoritism that had defined my entire life. I thought about my sister, Emily, and her family. They had a long history of financial mismanagement, relying on my parents to bail them out time and time again. They had no savings, no responsibility, and no sense of gratitude. My parents had already drained their retirement funds to help Emily and her husband, James, pay rent, and now they wanted to take the house I bought for them and give it to Emily's family. It wasn't just the financial side of things that stung, it was the emotional betrayal. I had worked so hard, endured years of being second best, to finally get to a place where I could provide something for my parents, something they had never given me. And now it was all being thrown back in my face. My entire life I had been the one to sacrifice, sacrificing my time, my needs, my desires to be the dutiful daughter. And yet I was still treated as an afterthought. This house was supposed to be my gesture of love, my way of showing them that I could provide for them. But it was clear that nothing I did could ever be enough. "Mom, this is my house," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I bought it for you, yes, but it was with the understanding that you would be living there, not Emily and her family. I didn't buy it for them." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then my mother's voice came through, laden with guilt. "Madison, please understand. Emily needs this. She has 2 kids and they don't have the space. You know how hard it's been for her. We can't just turn her away. This is what family does." The words hit me like a slap in the face. Family does this. I had given up everything for them. I had worked my tail off to achieve everything I had, and I was still expected to sacrifice more. How was I supposed to handle this? How was I supposed to accept that the one thing I had given myself was being taken from me, without even a word of gratitude? "I've sacrificed enough for this family," I replied, my voice trembling now. "I'm done being the one who bends over backward for everyone else. If Emily needs a place to live, then she can figure it out on her own. I'm not giving her my house." The conversation ended with my mother's pleading, but I was resolute. I had finally made up my mind. I would no longer be the person who catered to their every whim. No longer would I let myself be the invisible daughter, the one who was constantly overlooked in favor of my sister. This was my time to stand up for myself. A few weeks passed and I kept hearing bits and pieces from my parents. They continued to hint at the idea of moving Emily into the house, but I didn't budge. I was determined not to let them walk all over me anymore. Then one evening as I was leaving work, I got a message from my mom. "We're throwing a housewarming party for the new place this weekend. It'll be a great time for everyone to get together and celebrate." I didn't think much of it at first, but then I realized what was happening. They were throwing a party in the house I had bought, and I wasn't invited. The thought made my blood boil. I had bought this house for them, and now they were hosting a party without me. It was as though I was being erased from the picture entirely. They were already planning to move Emily and her family in, and I was being sidelined. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning, but I had decided to show up. I wasn't going to let this go unnoticed. If they were going to act like I didn't exist, I was going to make sure they knew I was still there. Saturday evening came and I parked a block away from the house. I could see the lights on, the guests milling around inside, the laughter and chatter filling the air. The house, the one I had bought for my parents, was now being celebrated by everyone except me. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I walked up to the front door, took a deep breath and rang the bell. The door swung open and I was face to face with my parents, standing in the doorway, shocked to see me. "What are you doing here?" my mother asked, her voice laced with surprise. "I'm here for the housewarming," I said, my voice steady. "The house that I bought." The look on their faces was priceless. They had no idea what to say. My father tried to stammer out an excuse, but it was too late. I had already seen everything I needed to see. The atmosphere in the room was charged with tension. My parents were stunned, their faces turning various shades of red as they struggled to piece together an explanation. The sight of them standing there, trying to maintain their composure while realizing they had been caught in their own game of manipulation, was oddly satisfying. For once, I wasn't the one left on the sidelines. My mother, always the first to recover in situations like this, took a step forward. "Madison, this isn't what you think," she said in an almost pleading tone. "We never meant for you to feel this way. We were just so excited, and your sister. She's been through a lot, and we wanted to make sure she and her family had a home. You understand, don't you?" My father stood there, wringing his hands nervously. He opened his mouth but closed it again, unsure of what to say. It was clear they both felt the weight of the situation, but their words, their excuses, felt empty to me. They were trying to rewrite the past, hoping that by glossing over the years of favoritism, I would just forgive them and pretend like nothing ever happened. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took a moment to look around the room. The house, the one I had worked so hard to buy, the one I had envisioned as a new beginning for us, was now a backdrop for this strange spectacle. The housewarming party was still going on inside, but there was no joy in it for me. The smiles of the guests, the clinking of glasses, the laughter, it all seemed hollow. They were celebrating a lie. "What exactly is it that I'm supposed to understand?" I finally asked, my voice steady but sharp. "You spent all these years telling me that I wasn't enough, that I had to work harder, do more, just to get a fraction of the attention you gave to Emily. And now, after everything, I buy you a house and you still choose her over me. What am I supposed to be grateful for? A house that isn't even mine anymore?" The words hung in the air, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in my parents' facade. My mother's expression faltered, and my father shifted uncomfortably on his feet. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when they would finally see that their actions had consequences. "Madison," my father began, his voice quieter now, "we didn't mean to hurt you. We've always had to take care of your sister. She's had a tough time and we couldn't turn our back on her. You've done well for yourself and we thought this would be the right thing to do for her. She needs stability." I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped my lips. "Stability?" I echoed. "You think giving her my house is giving her stability? You've given her everything. A house, a family, financial support, and all I've ever gotten from you is the leftover crumbs." The room was silent. No one spoke. I could see my mother's eyes watering, her lips trembling as she tried to find the right words, but it was too late. The years of pain, of being overlooked and undervalued, all of it came rushing back to me. The sacrifices I made for them, the dreams I had to put on hold, and the constant feeling that I was never good enough. All of it came crashing down like a tidal wave. "Do you even realize what you've done to me?" I said, my voice rising now, fueled by all the years of frustration and resentment. "You've taken everything from me. You've made me feel invisible in my own family. And now, you want to take the one thing I've given to you, the one thing I've worked for, and give it to Emily like I don't matter at all?" My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. My mother's face was pale, her eyes wide with shock. Emily, who had been standing behind them, looked uncomfortable but didn't say a word. She just stood there, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "I'm done," I said finally, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "I'm done trying to earn your love, your approval, your attention. You've never seen me for who I am. You've only ever seen me as an extension of Emily, someone who could fill in when she wasn't around. But I'm not that person anymore." I turned to leave, but my father stepped forward, his hand reaching out as though he wanted to stop me. "Madison, please," he said softly. "I know we've made mistakes, but we're family. You can't just walk away from us." I stopped at the door, my back to them. "Family isn't about just being related by blood," I said, my voice steady and resolute. "It's about love, respect, and equality. And what I've learned from you is that family can also be a source of pain, not just support. I'm not walking away from you. I'm walking away from the lies, from the emotional manipulation, from the years of being overlooked. I'm walking toward something better." Without another word, I left the house. I didn't look back. As I drove away, I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from the expectations, the comparisons, and the constant feeling of never being good enough. I had made a decision that would forever change the course of my life. And as difficult as it was, I knew it was the right one. The next few days were a blur of mixed emotions. I stayed at my apartment, avoiding phone calls from my parents. I didn't want to hear their apologies, their guilt, or their attempts to manipulate me back into the family fold. I needed time to heal, to find my own path, separate from the toxic ties that had held me down for so long. And as the days passed, I found myself growing stronger. I started to remember who I was before I became the family caretaker, before I became invisible. I started to rediscover my passions, my hobbies, and my sense of self-worth. But the battle wasn't over. I knew that. The confrontation I had with my parents was just the beginning of a much larger journey, one where I would have to rebuild my life from the ground up and learn how to protect my boundaries from the people who had spent a lifetime ignoring them. The aftermath of my confrontation with my parents left me feeling oddly liberated yet drained. I had finally voiced everything I had kept hidden for years, but the emotional toll of walking away from my family was immense. I spent the following days in a haze, wondering if I had made the right decision or if the guilt would eventually overwhelm me. Still, as time went on, I became more certain that this was the necessary step in reclaiming my life. The house I had bought for my parents, the one I had hoped would bring us closer, the one that was supposed to be a symbol of a fresh start, was now an anchor around my neck. Every time I thought about the housewarming party and how I wasn't even invited, I felt a deep, searing ache in my chest. I had given so much to them, sacrificed my own happiness for their approval, and in return they had thrown it all back in my face. Watching my mother as she gushed over Emily, making it seem like I didn't exist, was the final straw. I had to distance myself from all of that. For the next few weeks, I found solace in small, personal victories. My work was becoming more fulfilling than ever, and I began to see the fruits of the career I had worked so hard to build. I focused on my promotion at the investment bank, and as I threw myself into work, I started gaining new skills, leading more projects, and even earning higher bonuses. It felt empowering, like I was building something entirely on my own, with no one's interference. Despite my achievements, there was still this gnawing feeling of loneliness. Even though I had learned to value my independence, there were moments when I missed the idea of family. I missed the companionship I thought I would have had, especially now that I had distanced myself from the toxic dynamics that defined my relationship with my parents. The weight of that loss would occasionally hit me, especially on weekends, when I would look out the window of my apartment, longing for a connection that I no longer had. One of the most difficult things I had to come to terms with was the reality of my relationship with Emily. After years of resentment and rivalry, I didn't know where we stood. She had been the golden child, the one everyone adored, but I could no longer view her through the lens of my childhood jealousy. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that she had played a part in all the drama. She had always been the one my parents favored, and now she was taking advantage of their struggles without a second thought. A few days after the incident at the house, I received a message from her. It was a simple text: "Madison, we need to talk." My first instinct was to ignore it. After all, what was there to discuss? But then I hesitated. Perhaps it was time to face her. Perhaps it was time to finally clear the air between us, once and for all. When I agreed to meet her, I had no idea what to expect. I walked into the coffee shop, my palms sweating slightly, but I was determined to hold my ground. As I approached the table, I saw Emily already sitting there, her eyes downcast. She didn't look like the same confident woman I had grown up with. She looked tired, beaten down even. "Hey," I said, sitting down across from her. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with both regret and confusion. There was a moment of silence before she spoke. "I know things have been hard between us," she began, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "And I know I've been selfish. But I never thought you would walk away like this. I didn't know what you were going through all these years." I wanted to respond, to tell her everything I had felt all this time, but I stopped myself. Instead, I simply nodded. Emily continued, her voice breaking a little. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know I've been the one that's always been there for Mom and Dad, but I never understood how much you were giving up for them. I see now how unfair it was." Her words were painful, but also a small glimmer of something I had longed for: acknowledgement. In that moment, I saw that Emily wasn't the same person she had been. She had grown just as I had. Still, there was so much left unsaid between us. "You can't change the past," I replied quietly, "but I'm glad you're finally seeing things for what they are." Emily wiped her eyes, her voice trembling. "I want to change things. I want to make it right. I want to help you, Madison." I didn't know how to react to that. Part of me wanted to reach out, to rebuild the relationship we'd lost. But I had spent so many years being the second choice, the afterthought, that I couldn't allow myself to slip back into that old role. "I appreciate that," I said slowly, "but right now I need to focus on me. I've spent my whole life putting everyone else first, and I can't do that anymore." She nodded, understanding, and for the first time I felt like we were on equal ground. There was no longer the divide between the golden child and the forgotten one. We were two people who had been hurt by the same family, two women who had suffered in different ways. "I don't know if I can ever fix what's broken," Emily said, "but I'm here, Madison. If you need me, I'll be here." I smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Thank you, Emily. Maybe we can start fresh, but on our own terms." As I left the coffee shop that day, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't expected. My relationship with Emily wasn't perfect, and it may never be, but for the first time in my life I felt like I was in control. I was taking ownership of my story, my future, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me again. As the days passed, I continued to reflect on everything that had happened. The conversations with Emily, the housewarming incident, and the estrangement from my parents were all starting to settle in my mind. Despite everything, I felt more liberated than I ever had in my life. The house that I had purchased for my parents, intended to be a peace offering, had ended up being the catalyst that finally set me free from years of emotional manipulation. It had been a painful yet necessary step in reclaiming my own life, and I was beginning to see the fruits of my decision. In the weeks following our conversation, I focused more on myself. I was still dedicated to my career, and my role at the investment bank was progressing. I had been entrusted with even more responsibilities, and the work I was doing felt more meaningful. I was proving to myself, without needing anyone's validation, that I was capable of achieving great things on my own terms. The bonuses and promotions kept rolling in, and I found myself able to afford a lifestyle that was entirely mine, without any dependency on my family. But even with all these successes, there were moments of doubt. I had spent years chasing their approval, and even though I had finally broken free, I sometimes found myself wondering if I had made the right decision. Was it too harsh to cut them off completely? Was it possible that they would change, that they might realize their mistakes and come back to me with true apologies? I told myself that I had to keep my boundaries firm, but deep down, a part of me still wanted the family I had always dreamed of. One evening, as I sat at my desk working late into the night, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily. "Madison, I just wanted to check in. How are you doing?" I stared at the message for a few moments, feeling a mixture of emotions. I had been so focused on my own life that I hadn't really thought about Emily much after our conversation. Was she reaching out because she felt guilty? Or was she genuinely concerned about me? I wasn't sure. Still, I felt a sense of calm as I typed my reply. "I'm doing well. Just focusing on myself and my work. Thanks for asking." To my surprise, she replied almost immediately. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I want to help make things right. I know I can't fix the past, but I want to be a better sister. I've been talking to Mom and Dad, and they're starting to see things differently." My heart sank as I read her message. I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope, even though I knew better. Emily's words were kind, but I wasn't sure if I could trust her. I had spent too many years hoping for change, only to be let down repeatedly. Still, I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. "I appreciate that, Emily, but I need to take things slowly. I've been hurt a lot, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to dive back into the same old dynamics." Her response came a few minutes later. "I understand, Madison. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, and I'm sorry for everything. You deserve more." I put my phone down, feeling conflicted. On one hand, I was grateful that Emily was trying to mend things, but on the other, I couldn't help but wonder if this was just another attempt to manipulate me into forgiving them. My parents hadn't changed, and their reliance on me was a constant reminder of the power dynamics they had created. I wasn't ready to give that up again, and I knew that if I allowed them back in, I'd be stepping into the same pattern of sacrifice without reciprocity. A few days later, I received another message, this time from my father. It was short and to the point. "Madison, I think we need to talk. Can we meet?" I sat frozen for a moment, unsure of how to respond. My heart pounded in my chest, and a wave of anxiety washed over me. This was the moment I had been dreading. The question I had been asking myself for weeks was finally here. Was I ready to face them again? Could I have a conversation with my parents without falling back into old patterns of guilt and manipulation? After a few minutes, I composed myself and replied, "I don't think it's a good idea, Dad. I've made my decision and I'm not going back on it." I stared at the message, waiting for a response, but none came. It was almost as if I could feel the tension hanging in the air between us, even though we weren't in the same room. I had expected some kind of pushback, but the silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. The next few weeks were filled with a strange kind of peace. I focused on my work and began to branch out socially, meeting new people and forming friendships that didn't involve family baggage. I started taking weekend trips to explore new cities, something I had never been able to do when I was constantly catering to my family's needs. It felt freeing to make decisions for myself without the weight of their expectations looming over me. I also began to notice subtle changes within myself. I was becoming more confident, more assertive, and more comfortable in my own skin. I was learning to say no without feeling guilty, to prioritize my own well-being without worrying about disappointing anyone. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was living for me, not for my parents, not for my sister, but for myself. But even as I built this new life, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. It wasn't that I wanted to reconcile with my parents. I had come to terms with the fact that they would never change. But there was a part of me that still longed for a sense of family, a sense of belonging. I realized that while blood might bind us, true family is built on love, respect, and mutual support, not on manipulation and conditional affection. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer the afterthought in my own life. And that was the most empowering realization of all. A few months passed and my life settled into a new rhythm. I had continued to focus on my career, achieving new milestones that I had once thought were out of reach. I was no longer just the reliable, dependable daughter. I was someone who was building her own future, one that was independent of my family's control. Despite the progress I had made, there was still a lingering sense of something missing. While I had cut off the toxic relationships that had weighed me down for so long, I couldn't entirely escape the question of what family meant to me now. Then one evening, as I was preparing for a trip, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from my grandmother's lawyer, informing me that there was a letter for me from my grandparents, one that had been written before their passing. I had never received anything like this, so naturally I was curious, and more than a little apprehensive about what I might find inside. The letter was short, but it was full of warmth and wisdom. It was written in my grandmother's familiar script, and as I read it, I could almost hear her voice in my head. She expressed how proud she was of the person I had become and how she had always believed in me. It wasn't a message about money or possessions, but one of love and reassurance. It reminded me of the lessons she had instilled in me over the years, about the value of self-worth, the importance of creating your own path, and most of all, the idea that true family is built on unconditional love and support. The letter ended with a final wish. I hope that, when the time comes, you will know that love is not something to be earned. It is freely given. You have always been deserving of it. I sat there for a long time, holding the letter in my hands. It was as if my grandparents had known exactly what I needed to hear at that moment. The letter reaffirmed everything I had come to realize over the past year. My grandparents had always loved me, not because I had done anything to earn their affection, but because they simply chose to love me. They had never made me feel like an afterthought or a burden. They had always accepted me for who I was, and they had taught me to do the same. I realized then that my family wasn't the one I had been born into. It was the one I was creating for myself. It was the friends I had made, the colleagues who respected me, and the people who valued me for who I was. These were the people who gave me love and support without strings attached. I didn't need to keep chasing after approval or validation from those who had never truly seen me for who I was. I was worthy of love just as I was. That night, I reflected on everything that had happened. The decision to cut off my parents, the way they had manipulated me for years, and how I had finally broken free. It wasn't easy, and it had cost me more than I had expected, but in the end, it had been the right decision. I was no longer living for anyone else's approval. I was living for myself, and that was something I had never truly done before. As I packed for my trip, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of family expectations had been lifted, and I was ready to embrace the world on my own terms. I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to them. What I needed was to continue on my journey of growth and self-discovery, to build a life that was true to who I was, and to find peace with the decisions I had made. The next day, I boarded a plane to a new city for work, but this time, it wasn't just another business trip. It was an opportunity for me to explore, to experience new things, and to continue growing as the person I had become. I had learned that the key to moving forward wasn't about fixing old relationships. It was about making new ones that were rooted in mutual respect and understanding. It was about learning to love myself first and foremost. I realized that I had finally come full circle. The family I had always wanted was never going to come from the people who had raised me. It was up to me to create that family for myself, based on the values that truly mattered: love, respect, and support. And I was determined to make it happen, one day at a time. As I settled into my new apartment, I took a deep breath, feeling at peace with my decision to sell the house and cut ties with the toxic relationships in my life. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone anymore. My life was mine to live, and that was a gift I would never take for granted again. In the months that followed, I continued to grow both personally and professionally. I made new friends, cultivated meaningful relationships, and found a sense of belonging in places I never expected. I began to travel more, exploring new cultures and learning about the world from a fresh perspective. I even took up new hobbies, like hiking and painting, that brought me joy and fulfillment. The most significant change, however, was the way I saw myself. No longer the afterthought, no longer the one who had to prove herself to anyone. I had become someone who was unapologetically true to herself. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all. The key message in this story is the importance of self-worth, independence, and setting healthy boundaries in relationships. For years, the narrator endured emotional neglect, favoritism, and manipulation from their family, constantly feeling like an afterthought in a household that favored their sister. Despite achieving great professional success and personal growth, the narrator struggled with family dynamics that demanded constant sacrifice. However, through a journey of self-discovery, the narrator learned that family is not solely defined by blood, but by respect, love, and mutual support. The ultimate lesson is that taking ownership of your life and making decisions based on your own values can be a liberating and transformative experience. For elderly individuals, this story serves as a reminder that it's never too late to redefine personal boundaries and prioritize one's own needs. It is important to recognize that love and respect should be freely given, not earned through endless sacrifices. The story emphasizes the significance of self-care and living authentically, showing that true happiness comes from embracing who you are, without the weight of past expectations or toxic relationships. Even in later years, it's possible to create a life that is fulfilling, peaceful, and true to oneself, without constantly seeking validation from others. True family is built on unconditional love, and it's essential to surround ourselves with people who honor and respect that. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found value in this story and that it inspired you to think about your own relationships and boundaries. If you got something out of this video, please take a moment to comment one below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories and life lessons that will help you navigate your journey. Also, please like the video and share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing this message. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings about the video, so feel free to share your reflections in the comments. Remember, you deserve love, respect, and happiness at every stage of life. Thanks again for being here, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Take care.